The entire airport froze when a TSA agent ripped a young black woman's passport in half, calling her entitled and laughing in her face. What he didn't know was that this woman wasn't just any passenger. She was the new CEO of the very airline he worked for. And when the truth came out, the whole airport went silent. Want to know what happened next? Subscribe and watch till the end. The line at Gate 14 stretched like a ribbon of exhaustion, families clutching passports, business travelers scrolling through phones, toddlers crying from missed naps. Among them stood Maya Thompson, a young black woman dressed in a simple beige blazer and blue jeans. She carried nothing that screamed importance, just a calm posture and a passport that had seen too many continents to count. She'd arrived early, as always. Years in the aviation industry had taught her that the airport is a mirror of humanity. Some people rush, some pause, some help, some hurt. But today, she wasn't traveling for work. Today, she was flying to attend a closed-door meeting that would quietly announce her as the new CEO of North Star Airlines, the very company operating this flight. The announcement wasn't public yet. Only a handful of board members knew. To everyone else, she was just another passenger. And that anonymity, she thought, was refreshing. As she approached the security checkpoint, her thoughts drifted to her late father. He had been a luggage handler at this same airport decades ago, a quiet man who taught her that dignity has no uniform. Respect people even when you wear the suit, he'd say, because the world forgets that humility also flies. The metallic beep of the scanner snapped her out of memory. The TSA officer on duty, Officer Reed, motioned for her to step forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the look of a man who believed his authority was armor. "Passport," he said without glancing up. Maya handed it over with a polite smile. He flipped it open, squinted at her photo, and then back at her. "Where are you headed, Miss Thompson?" "New York," she replied softly. "Purpose of travel?" "Business." He studied her, his eyes narrowing. "Business, huh? Looks more like vacation. Or maybe a one-way ticket to trouble." The passengers behind her exchanged awkward looks. A few turned away, others pulled out phones, pretending not to listen. Maya's voice remained steady. "Sir, is there a problem?" Reed's lips twisted into a smirk. "Problem? Not yet. Let's see what we find." He unzipped her carry-on, rifled through neatly folded documents, even tapped on her laptop like it might confess something. When he found nothing, frustration clouded his face. "These people think they can talk their way through security," he muttered, loud enough for the line to hear. Then, in one sharp motion that made the crowd gasp, he ripped her passport in half. The sound, paper tearing through silence, cut deeper than words ever could. Maya froze. For a second, her world shrank to that single motion. Her father's words echoed inside her. Dignity has no uniform. Around her, whispers swelled. Why'd he do that? That's illegal. Is she in trouble? Maya blinked back tears. Why would you do that? She asked, her tone trembling but controlled. Reed shrugged. Could be fake. Could be anything. You people always have some story. A passenger pulled out a phone to record. Another gasped. You can't just destroy someone's passport. Maya took a deep breath. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Instead, she looked directly at the man and said quietly, You just made the biggest mistake of your career. He laughed. Is that so? She nodded. Yes, and you'll understand soon. For a moment, time stood still. Even the flight attendants nearby paused, sensing the weight of the moment. Maya gathered the torn halves of her passport, pressed them together like a wounded bird, and walked toward the supervisor's desk without another word. The supervisor, startled by the murmurs, rushed forward. Ma'am, what happened? Maya handed over the broken document. Your officer did this, she said, her voice calm but resolute. Passengers began whispering louder now, phones recording, eyes wide, the story spreading like wildfire across the terminal. Reed shifted uncomfortably, realizing maybe this wasn't going to vanish quietly. The supervisor called airport security, and Maya sat in silence on a nearby bench. She didn't cry. Instead, she watched the planes taxi on the runway, each one carrying thousands of stories, some cruel, some kind. She whispered to herself, Sometimes life doesn't need revenge. It just needs time. What no one around her knew was that in less than 24 hours, every employee at this airport, including Officer Reed, would receive a corporate memo announcing her as their new chief executive. And the first policy she planned to implement? Respect training at every level. But for now she waited, quiet, patient, and powerful in her stillness, because real strength never rushes its moment. Maya sat in the waiting lounge near Gate 14, her torn passport resting on her lap like the remains of a trust broken in public. Around her the world carried on, families boarding flights, children pressing faces to glass, flight attendants rushing past with polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The incident had already gone viral inside the terminal. Travelers who'd witnessed it were whispering, sharing clips, and tagging airport pages. But Maya didn't check her phone. She didn't need validation. She needed reflection. Her father's voice echoed again in her memory. Dignity isn't about winning arguments. It's about not letting people drag you where they belong. Across the room, Officer Reed paced near the security booth, trying to look busy, but stealing anxious glances toward her. His smirk had disappeared. The supervisor had taken his badge temporarily, pending investigation. He'd been told to stay nearby until senior management arrived. Senior management, of course, meant her. But he didn't know that yet. The airline had arranged a small private jet to New York for the upcoming board meeting. The team had insisted on a quiet arrival, away from public eyes, until the announcement was official. Yet, fate had chosen otherwise. It had staged its own press conference right here in Terminal C. A young attendant approached her nervously. "Ma'am, can I get you some water? I saw what happened." "That was awful," Maya smiled kindly. "Thank you, but I'm okay. Just doing what my father taught me. Breathe first, act later." The girl nodded, inspired by the calm that radiated from her. Moments later, a man in a gray suit arrived, Alan Rivera, the regional operations manager for North Star Airlines. He looked tense, his phone buzzing nonstop. When he saw Maya, recognition flickered in his eyes and turned into alarm. "Miss Thompson?" he whispered, stepping closer. "What happened here?" "The entire terminal's talking about an officer tearing your passport. Please tell me this is some misunderstanding." "It happened," Maya said evenly. "In front of everyone." She held out the torn document. "That's my passport." "Or what's left of it," Alan swallowed hard. He'd known her from previous executive projects, but had no idea she'd be this close to his operation. His mind raced. If this reaches the board before the announcement, the PR damage will be nuclear. He turned sharply toward the officer. "Reed, over here, now." Reed approached, still defiant but visibly uneasy. "Sir, I was doing my job." She was acting suspicious. "I thought the passport was fake." Alan's tone went cold. "Suspicious?" "She's one of our executives." "Do you realize what you've done?" Reed blinked, confused. "Executive? She said she was on business. She didn't say for who." "She didn't have to," Alan replied sharply. "Your job isn't to humiliate passengers. It's to ensure safety with respect." The crowd, sensing something bigger was unfolding, began whispering again. Cameras pointed, phones tilted, attention sharpened. Maya stood up slowly, her presence commanding without trying. "Mr. Rivera," she said softly, "I think we should handle this privately. Not for his sake, but because leadership doesn't perform for applause." Alan nodded, relieved by her grace. "Of course, Ms. Thompson. Let's step into the lounge." Inside the glass-walled executive lounge, the noise of the terminal faded. Reed stood across from her, shoulders tense. Maya looked at him, not with anger, but with quiet power. "Officer Reed," she began, "tell me something. When you saw me in line, what made you assume my passport was fake?" He hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe I've just seen a lot of things. You start to get instincts." "Instincts," she repeated softly. "Or assumptions?" He looked down. Maya stepped closer. "You could have checked my record, scanned my ID, asked one question respectfully. But instead, you tore up something that represented my identity and my right to belong. That action doesn't just break paper, it breaks trust. Do you understand that?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was surgical, calm, deeply human. He nodded slowly. I messed up." "I'm sorry," she said gently. "Doesn't always fix what's visible, but accountability can." Alan watched in silence. realizing he was witnessing something far greater than a disciplinary talk. This was leadership in motion. Maya turned to him. "Please inform headquarters. I'll file a formal report once I reach New York. But I don't want this to end with punishment. I want it to start with education. I want training for every officer, every gate agent, every voice that speaks to a traveler." Alan nodded quickly. "Understood. I'll make sure it happens." She smiled faintly. "Good, because titles don't make people powerful, Alan. Behavior does." She walked out of the lounge, the crowd parting instinctively to let her pass. Officer Reed watched her go, a hollow feeling twisting in his chest. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the man in control. He felt like the man who'd just met the mirror he'd been avoiding. As she reached the boarding gate, her flight had already been delayed due to operational hold, a small mercy of fate giving her a moment longer to breathe. She looked out at the runway, sunlight reflecting off the planes like silver promises. Her voice was soft but steady. Respect isn't taught by rules. It's taught by moments like this. And in that quiet declaration, somewhere between hurt and hope, karma took its first step toward boarding. The glass doors of North Star Airlines headquarters opened silently as Maya entered, her expression calm but unreadable. Every step she took echoed against marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Staff who had seen the viral airport clip straightened instantly, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. The story had already spread across the company like wildfire. Everyone knew someone had humiliated a woman at JFK, but few knew that woman was their new CEO. Inside the top-floor conference room, 12 board members sat around an oval table. Their faces reflected varying shades of anxiety and curiosity. At the center sat Richard Holden, the chairman, a man known for his sharp instincts and sharper words. "Maya," he said, rising to greet her. "Before we begin the formal introduction, I must say, quite an eventful arrival." She smiled slightly. "Eventful is one word for it." Richard gestured toward a seat at the head of the table. "Please, we've seen the footage. The incident at TSA, it's already trending." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Maya said simply. "But the problem isn't that I was embarrassed. It's that millions of travelers endure this kind of treatment every day, and no one listens until it happens to someone with a title." A quiet hum of agreement rippled through the room. "Do you plan to press charges?" One of the board members asked cautiously. "I plan to do more than that," Maya replied. Her tone remained calm, but there was iron beneath the silk. "I plan to fix the system that made him think he could." She tapped her tablet, and the screen on the wall flickered to life, showing images of Officer Reed, his badge, and reports of prior complaints buried in bureaucracy. "He wasn't a bad man by nature," she said softly. "He was a man given power without accountability, the kind the system breeds. And if we're going to change the culture of air travel, we start here, with us." The boardroom fell silent. Richard leaned back, studying her. "You're suggesting North Star Airlines takes responsibility for TSA behavior?" "I'm suggesting we take responsibility for our own humanity," Maya replied. "When passengers enter our terminals, they don't separate who runs security and who runs flights. To them, it's all one experience. If one part fails, we all fail." Her words hit like quiet thunder, not loud, but impossible to ignore. From the back of the room, Alan Rivera entered, carrying a folder. His face was pale but resolute. "Ms. Thompson," he said respectfully, "the officer has been suspended. The federal investigation has begun, but there's more." He handed her the file. Inside were 37 prior passenger complaints against Officer Reed, most citing racial profiling or verbal abuse. Each one had been marked closed without action. Maya's voice was steady. 37 times someone tried to speak up. 37 times they were ignored. Today wasn't karma, it was inevitable. She placed the file in front of the board. "We can't undo what happened to me, but we can make sure no one else feels powerless in a place designed to take them home." The room remained silent, the weight of her words thick as gravity. Then Maya turned toward Richard. "I want North Star to launch a joint initiative, mandatory empathy and bias training, not as a PR stunt, but as a permanent operational policy. I also want an independent hotline for passengers who face discrimination in our terminals. No middle managers, no cover-ups. A younger board member, nervous but impressed, asked, "That's going to cost millions. Are you sure investors will approve?" Maya looked at him, a gaze both firm and kind. "The cost of change will always be less than the cost of silence." Richard finally spoke, his voice quieter now. "You're not here just to lead an airline, are you?" "No," she said, standing. "I'm here to redefine what leadership looks like in a world that's forgotten what respect feels like." The room erupted into applause, hesitant at first, then growing in conviction. Even Richard, the man known for never showing emotion, joined in. When the meeting ended, Maya walked to the tall window overlooking the city skyline. The clouds were moving fast, restless, alive, just like the transformation she intended to spark. Behind her, Alan approached. "They're calling you the woman who brought fire to the sky," he said with a faint smile. She turned slightly. "No, I'm just reminding people what light looks like." As she left the boardroom, reporters were already gathering downstairs, headlines exploding across social media. Airline CEO confronts TSA racism with grace and fury. From victim to visionary, Maya Thompson redefines power. But for Maya, this wasn't about headlines. It was about healing. And as the sun broke through the clouds over the skyline, she whispered to herself, "Sometimes, karma doesn't destroy, it rebuilds." The next morning, the world woke up to a storm. News channels, social media feeds, and talk shows were filled with the same story. TSA agent tears up black CEO's passport. Everyone had an opinion. Some defended the officer. Others were furious at the injustice. But no one knew the full truth, not yet. Maya sat alone in her office, the early light of dawn spilling across the polished desk. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but she ignored it. In her hand was a small flash drive, the key to everything. Inside it was the full security recording from the TSA checkpoint. The moment her passport was ripped, every cruel word, every laugh, and, pause, most painfully, every face that stood by and did nothing. She replayed it one last time, not out of anger, but to remind herself of why she had to do this. Then she stood, took a deep breath, and walked toward the press hall where dozens of cameras waited. As she entered, the murmurs died. The air felt charged thick with anticipation. Maya stood behind the podium, her voice calm yet strong. "Before I speak as a CEO," she began, "I want to speak as a traveler, a daughter, and a human being who knows what it feels like to be disrespected for something I never chose, the color of my skin." A hush fell over the crowd. She clicked the remote, and the massive screen behind her came to life. The video began to play, unedited, raw, undeniable. The sound of Officer Reed's mocking voice filled the room. "You think you're special because you wear fancy clothes? You people always act like you own the place." Gasps echoed through the hall. Reporters glanced at one another in disbelief. Maya didn't flinch. When the video ended, she looked straight into the cameras. "That man didn't just tear a passport," she said softly. "He tore through dignity. Through years of effort, through every barrier someone like me had to cross to get here. But I don't want revenge. I want reflection. Because for every Maya, there are thousands who face this and stay silent." She paused, letting her words breathe. Silence is the soil where discrimination grows. Today we stop watering it. Behind her, the North Star Airlines logo appeared, followed by new policy headlines: Zero Tolerance Code of Conduct, Empathy and Awareness Program for Airport Staff, Public Accountability Portal. It wasn't a PR stunt. It was a declaration. Maya continued, her voice filled with quiet power. "We're not here to humiliate anyone. We're here to heal what's broken. Even Officer Reed deserves a chance to learn, to change. But he also needs to face what he's done. Because accountability isn't cruelty, it's courage." The hall erupted into applause. But Maya didn't smile, not yet. She knew what was coming next. That afternoon, she received a call from the Federal Security Office. Officer Reed had been summoned for review. Maya was invited to attend. Many advised her not to. "Let the system handle it," they said. But Maya believed in something deeper. Justice isn't a headline. It's a conversation. At the hearing, Officer Reed looked nothing like the man from the video. His head was bowed, his voice trembling. I didn't know who she was," he whispered. Maya's eyes met his. "That's the problem," she replied gently. "Respect shouldn't depend on who someone is. It should depend on who you are." The room went still. No anger, no shouting, just truth. After the hearing, reporters swarmed her again. One shouted, "Maya, do you forgive him?" She paused. The world waited. Then, with a soft but firm tone, she said, "Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength in disguise. I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace." Those words spread across the internet faster than the scandal itself. Within hours, hashtags began trending. Forgiveness as power, in Maya speaks, justice with grace. That night, Maya sat by her office window again, watching planes take off into the golden sunset. Her assistant entered quietly. "Ma'am, the world is calling you an inspiration," she smiled faintly. "I'm just reminding the world that power means nothing without compassion." For the first time in days, she allowed herself to exhale. The noise of the world faded, replaced by the soft hum of engines outside. In her heart, she knew. Justice had spoken, not through revenge, but through redemption. A week later, Maya Washington found herself at JFK again, but this time it was different. The lines moved faster, the agents were attentive, and the airport had a quiet, professional energy that hadn't existed before. She walked through the terminal with her usual calm confidence, her diplomatic passport in hand. As she approached the gate for her flight to Los Angeles, she noticed a familiar face in the security checkpoint line. "Officer Reed," he froze, eyes wide, and instinctively stepped back. Maya didn't flinch. She simply nodded once, acknowledging him without a trace of anger in her expression. He was no longer the man who had ripped her passport and laughed in her face. His posture was stiff, almost apologetic. The uniform hung differently, not with arrogance, but with the weight of accountability. Maya boarded her flight and took her seat in first class. She looked out the window at the bustling tarmac below, the planes ready to soar. But her mind was on Reed, not out of anger, but reflection. How fragile power could be and how heavy accountability was. As the flight attendant walked past, she smiled politely. Then, in a moment that would surprise no one, Reed appeared at the end of the aisle. His voice barely audible, he said, "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, truly." Maya turned, meeting his eyes. There was no mockery, no defensiveness, only sincerity, a rare human moment in a world built on authority and fear. "I accept your apology," she said softly. "But understand this, apology is the beginning, not the end. Your actions before, they were a choice. And every choice carries consequences." He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. I've spent the past week, I've been thinking about what I did. Not just to you, but to everyone I've treated that way. I'm going to change. I have to." Maya's expression softened slightly, but she kept her voice firm. "Change is a responsibility, Reed. It's easy to say the words, harder to live them. You will have opportunities to rebuild, but it starts with humility. Not just for the passengers, but for yourself." He bowed his head. The hum of the engines filled the moment with gravity. Then, as if by some silent accord, they both turned their attention outward, watching the sunset reflect off the wings of the plane. The flight attendants began their rounds, and Maya noticed the crew moving with precision and respect, not just efficiency. She knew the ripple of her actions at JFK had changed more than one person's day. It had started to shift a culture. Reed stayed in the aisle, quietly observing, learning. And for the first time, he understood. Authority without empathy is nothing. Power without compassion is empty. Maya leaned back in her seat, letting her thoughts drift. She thought about the countless passengers who had silently endured humiliation. She thought about the small acts of courage it took to confront injustice. And she thought about the legacy she wanted to leave, a world where dignity was a right, not a privilege. Hours passed, the plane cutting through the clouds. In that quiet moment above the world, a profound truth settled in her chest. Redemption was not about punishment. Redemption was about change, about taking responsibility and about making the world a little better than it was before. By the time the plane touched down in Los Angeles, Maya felt lighter. She had faced the storm and come through it not with vengeance, but with power tempered by compassion. As passengers disembarked, she walked to the exit, her stride steady, her presence commanding yet gentle. Behind her, Reed remained seated, contemplating the words she had spoken, and in that small, fleeting moment, the weight of his actions finally began to lift, not because the world forgave him, but because he had begun the hardest part, facing the truth and choosing to change. Maya stepped out into the Los Angeles sunlight, feeling the warmth on her face, knowing that justice had not only been served, it had been transformed into opportunity, into awareness, into hope. She smiled. This was what victory felt like, not triumph over a person, but triumph over injustice itself. And as the airport staff quietly watched her pass, they felt it too, the undeniable power of dignity, courage, and the relentless pursuit of what was right. A year had passed since Maya Washington's confrontation at JFK. The airport, once a place of tension and fear for countless passengers, had transformed. Lines moved efficiently, agents greeted travelers with respect, and the culture of intimidation had been replaced by one of accountability and service. But Maya's work wasn't done. She knew change didn't come from a single action. It came from persistence, vision, and leadership. She stepped into the Grand Hyatt Ballroom in Washington, D.C., the room buzzing with energy. Airline CEOs, TSA officials, senators, and even the Secretary of Homeland Security filled every seat. All eyes turned to the stage as Maya approached the podium. Today, she wasn't just a passenger, not just a CEO. She was a messenger of systemic change. "We are not in the business of logistics," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "We are not in the business of security. We are in the business of people." The room fell silent. Every word carried weight. Every pause held meaning. Our systems, our checkpoints, our gates, these are not barriers. They are the first handshake, the first impression. And for too long, that handshake has felt like a fist. Maya walked across the stage, her presence magnetic, her tone firm yet inspiring. She spoke of responsibility, of how authority can protect or humiliate. She spoke of empathy, of de-escalation, and of the dignity every person deserved. In the front row, David Chen, the new FSD at JFK, took meticulous notes. Behind him, Sarah Jenkins, now relegated to a consulting role, sat quietly, reflecting on what had been lost and what had been rebuilt. "We have trained our staff not just to do their jobs, but to care about the human being in front of them," Maya continued. "And the results speak for themselves. A 60% drop in formal passenger complaints, a 30% rise in employee satisfaction, and a culture that values respect over fear." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. This wasn't just a victory for Velocity Airlines or for herself. This was a victory for every passenger who had ever felt invisible, disrespected or humiliated in a line or at a gate. Today, I am proud to announce a partnership with major airlines across the nation to create a National Passenger Bill of Rights, she said. This ensures that the standards we implemented at JFK will no longer be optional. They will be the law of the land. The room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that lasted long enough to make the moment unforgettable. But Maya wasn't finished. What happened to me at that checkpoint was not an isolated incident. It was the symptom of a system that enabled prejudice, arrogance, and abuse. And the truth is, one person can make a difference, but it takes courage, persistence, and accountability to create real, lasting change. Her words resonated far beyond the ballroom. Every CEO, every official, every legislator in that room understood that this wasn't just about one TSA agent or one airline. It was about culture, leadership, and the fundamental decency owed to every human being. Maya stepped down from the podium to the quiet applause of those closest to her. The Secretary of Homeland Security approached, shaking her hand firmly. "Miss Washington," he said, his voice filled with admiration, "you didn't just change a checkpoint. You changed the conversation for the entire country." Maya smiled. "The work continues, sir. Justice is only the beginning. True change is in the culture we build every day. As she left the ballroom, she thought briefly of Officer Thompson, the man whose arrogance had set all of this in motion. He had faced consequences, yes, but it was the system he exposed that had been transformed. And for Maya, that was the true victory. Above all, she carried with her a simple but profound truth. One person's courage can ripple outward, touching lives, shifting systems, and inspiring generations. That power, tempered with empathy, accountability, and unyielding resolve, was unstoppable. The story of Maya Washington became more than a tale of confrontation and justice. It became a blueprint for leadership, a testament to the power of dignity, and a reminder that hard karma, when paired with courage and wisdom, can create something far greater than revenge. It can create transformation. And as she boarded her flight that evening, settling into her seat and looking out at the sunset reflecting off the wings, she knew this was only the beginning. Her mission wasn't complete, but the foundation was laid. For passengers, for employees, for the entire industry, her legacy had begun. Because in the end, real change isn't measured by one victory, one confrontation, or one paycheck lost. It's measured by the lives uplifted, the systems transformed, and the courage it inspires in others to stand, speak, and act with integrity. And as Maya's plane took off, the lights of the city fading below, one truth remained. Justice had a face, and that face belonged to her, and it was unstoppable. Stories like this remind us that courage and integrity can change the world. If Maya's story inspired you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful true life stories every week. Don't miss the next story that will make you think, feel, and never underestimate the power of standing up.